This is difficult to do because it occurred so long ago, but the most significant message I was given was to share with others. Of course, the phenomenon of NDEs was not generally understood in the 1970s, so when I repeated the incident, I was ridiculed. It's a complicated story. My husband worked as a deputy sheriff, and I had a 2-year-old boy. I'd gone to the doctor with pain sensations and the impression that I was pregnant, but that something was wrong. He explained that it was a cold that had lodged in my uterus and that if I felt pain, I should take a warm bath. When I got home from church one Sunday, the agony was back. My hubby was working. I had a beer and took an aspirin. I took a bath in our enormous ancient claw-footed bathtub after my son had fallen asleep for his afternoon nap. I became weaker and weaker till I was afraid I wouldn't be able to get out of the tub. Finally, I was able to slip out and retrieve the big robe I'd worn while pregnant with my son from the bathroom door's hook. Our bathroom was upstairs, but I made it down to the couch in the main area. My 2-year-old awoke and went in search of me. I was exhausted and in excruciating agony. I thought I was going to pass out. I picked up the phone and dialed the sheriff's dispatch number. They claimed my husband was involved in a traffic accident and would return home after his work was completed. I dialed my husband's aunt's number. She stated that her father was ill, but that if she could get him taken care of, she would come. I returned to the couch and instructed my son to go to the neighbors, elderly people who he was often racing over to see, and stay there if mommy fell asleep and wouldn't wake up. My husband's aunt arrived. My son was nearby, playing with toys. The discomfort increased. My spouse returned home and dialed the doctor's number. He left to get pain medication. The agony was virtually unbearable by this point. My husband returned with Tylenol 3, which enraged me so much that I sprang off the couch in a rage I'd never felt before or since, yelling and swearing. Then I collapsed on the couch, as frail as a dish rag. He knelt beside me and instructed me to remove my contact lenses. I explained that I couldn't. He claimed I had no choice. "Fine," I said. I lifted my head, inserted my contacts into his hand, and convulsed. He slapped me senseless, went to the phone, called the doctor, cursed and yelled at him to get his fat ass over here because his wife was dying. He also requested an ambulance. The ache was gone, but I was dizzy. I couldn't stay conscious all the time. I was in and out with every heartbeat. My husband later informed me that the doctor told him to move his car around to the front. I know. We should have sued the doctor, but we didn't. My husband eventually learned that the doctor expected him to bring his patrol car and go to the hospital with lights and sirens, but instead he brought our family car. The ambulance crew was still there, and I was placed on a stretcher and transferred into the family car. In his automobile, the doctor followed him to the medical center. I saw my husband and son clothed in black funeral robes and holding hands while I was on the stretcher. Their expressions were heartbreaking. My spouse and son both appeared lost and despondent. I hadn't been in the car long when I felt a flying sensation and warmth filling me up like hot chocolate on a chilly winter's day. Flying and euphoria followed the floating. I've never felt better in my life. If this is death, then males who are sick, disabled, or elderly people are in for a pleasant surprise, I reasoned. I'm young and healthy, but this is far superior. I realized how heavy my body had been, how many aches and pains I'd gone through without realizing it. It was incredible to be free of my body and fly. Then I found myself in a dark tunnel. I was going toward the now proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. In the darkness around the tube, I sensed beings. They were in pain and crying out to me. 2 of them were familiar to me. They begged me to assist them. I walked toward them, feeling powerful and invincible, grabbing their hands and pulling them out of the darkness and into the tunnel. A voice warned me sharply not to do so. He stated, yes, he said, that there were regulations, and I didn't know what they were. People couldn't bring me out of the darkness, but they could draw me into it. He told me to keep driving straight ahead and that I didn't know anything and shouldn't assume I did, or I'd get in trouble. I arrived at the end of the tunnel's precipice. As far as the eye could see, there were spherical lights. Inside the spheres were blazing brilliant white lines that reminded me of electric light bulb filaments. I recall thinking that I needed to find something earthly to compare the insides of the spheres to, in case I ever had the opportunity to tell someone, and I landed on the filaments inside a light bulb. I wanted to flee. I knew that if I joined these lights, I'd be one of them for life. I had no idea who they were or what they did, but I could tell they weren't idle. They were there for a reason. The voice reminded me of my image of my husband and son dressed in funeral attire. He threatened to upset some plan if I didn't return to them. The plan would be fixed and everything would be fine in the end, so I could go ahead if I wished. The implications of my early death would be that my husband and kid would suffer in ways I could not have imagined, and I would know that these sufferings would be the result of my selfish decision not to return. I'd know this for the rest of my life. It wouldn't be a great loss for me to endure, more like a sting of conscience that would never completely heal, except when you realize how long eternity is. Okay, I'll go back, I responded. But can I simply do what I'm supposed to do and then die, bypassing the entire old age thing? It was as if I'd spoken the most amusing thing ever. I could hear the entire universe laughing. I had the idea that time was an illusion, and that a second or a millennium meant the same thing to these beings. I heard a voice calling from a great far away. "I need you," the voice stated. Then I noticed something green and a car door handle. "Where am I?" I inquired. My spouse informed me that we are on our way to the Burlington Medical Center and we're on Highway 61. I realized I was driving on a freeway. I was in and out of consciousness once more. When we arrived at the hospital, I could only hear the doctor and my husband speak. I was led to a room where a needle the length of my uterus was inserted to obtain blood. I appeared to be conscious at the time. I shrieked when the needle was placed, but otherwise I was quiet. They delivered a warm blanket to me. I proceeded to the operating room. I found myself in a long black corridor during the surgery. I was traveling at an uncomfortably fast pace. I didn't appear to have any legs or feet to stop myself. I noticed a light. I moved toward it. I reasoned that if I concentrated on rotating, I might be able to enter the room with the light. It was successful. I was looking out for the Mississippi River the next thing I knew. It was starting to get dark. Cars have their headlights turned on. Cars stopped to pay the toll on the bridge that connects Iowa and Illinois. I decided to go down, peer through the car window, and if someone yelled, I'd know I was a ghost. Then I remembered something the guy said. I'm not sure what the regulations are. What if I get caught out on the Mississippi River and have to constantly scare people to keep myself entertained? I made the decision to turn around. I would know I was a ghost if I passed through something substantial. When I glanced around, I noticed a window with molding. My spouse later told me that a light was turned on in that area because it was a makeshift waiting room where a nurse had instructed him to wait. It was located on the 4th level of the old Burlington Hospital near the river. That toll bridge could be seen if you look down from the 4th floor. It's terrifying to believe that this actually happened. The building is no longer used as a hospital, but every time I pass that bridge, I stare up at the 4th story. My husband noticed me glide through the room and out the window. He described my appearance as fuzzy TV reception. Years later, he noticed my white satin pajamas and commented that I appeared to be clad in white satin when I passed through the window. He claimed he looked at the clock in the room to recall when I died. The time was 8 o'clock. My husband was nowhere to be found in the room. I went through it too quickly. The doctor who operated on me was not the same as the one that came to my residence, but he was the doctor on call that night. When he came into the recovery room after the surgery and I was conscious, I felt complete affection for him and thought, if it couldn't be me, I'm pleased this lovely man gets to die. I felt a bubble of love envelop both him and me. He was accompanied by a resident who seems frightened around me. I was in a magical bubble of love and light with the doctor. The inhabitant was vexing. Everyone was disappointed when I returned to the doctor's office in Burlington to have my sutures removed. I was informed that I would not be seeing the doctor who had operated on me because he had died a few days previously from a terrible stroke. Instead, my own inept doctor removed my stitches. Because I couldn't make sense of what had happened, I asked him if exhilaration was associated with shock. He said no, turned aside, and mumbled something about unusual reports. I didn't say anything else to him. I didn't have faith in him.